Well, welcome to the second last session of our six-part journey, which we've called Live for a Change, and we have subtitled it Exploring the Spirituality of the 12 Steps. One of my favorite colleagues is Dr. Chris Hall. And whenever I work with him, he has a saying which has meant quite a lot to me. Chris often says that repetition is the mother of all learning. And that gives me an excuse to just share with you again our two hoped-for outcomes for our journey together. That on the one hand, I've been wanting to keep alive for us the vision of the possibilities of inner change. Dallas Willard, some of you may know Dallas or have read some of his books. He teaches that reliable change in our life often takes a certain pattern. It begins with a vision, it has intention, and it has means. And he uses the acronym VIM, V-I-M. The first part of the journey of change so often is rooted in vision. And that's why I've been wanting to keep alive the vision of the possibility of inner change. That the God we worship, the God who's come to us in Jesus Christ, the God who is present in the power of the Holy Spirit, is indeed the great transformer. The one who is able to break the snare of the snake. The one who is able to liberate us from those things that so often paralyze us. The one who's able to change our heart of stone into a heart of flesh. And I really hope that that vision is alive in your heart and mind. God is the great, great transformer. And then on the other hand, I've been wanting us to see how the 12 steps can become means. Remember, V-I-M, vision, intention, means. How the 12 steps can become means by which we cooperate with God in this journey of inner change. That inner change, inner transformation is not automatic. It's not just going to happen. It doesn't just fall on our heads. That there are ways and means by which we can cooperate with God so that God's transforming grace can work more deeply within our lives. And so over these past few weeks, we've been looking at the 12 steps within that context. But I want to push the pause button on our video, and we go into our icebreaker. I wonder if you would perhaps with each other just share something good that has happened for you since last we met. Maybe just to look back over the last few days and notice something good that has happened for you, and whether you would be willing to share that with the group that you're in, to share as much or as little as you would like. And then you may also remember that I invited you into some God work. We looked at the whole journey of change last time we met. And I invited you this week to just begin praying for a specific change internal change in your life. And I wonder how that experience has been for you. And you may like, again, just to share as much or as little as you would like. So have a good time of connection. Bless you. Well, I hope that your time together was connecting, and I hope that the moment of sharing something good was a moment of also joyful celebration and thanksgiving for yourselves together. The theme for this session is restoring relationships. And what I want to do is I want us to look at steps 8 and 9. I'm going to call step 8 the relational step, and I'm going to call step 9 the restitution step. And like I've been doing throughout the series so far, I want to organize my input around 3 foundational thoughts. My prayer always is that somehow, as I just share my own heart with you and what I've prepared, that somehow God will take what I say and somehow that there will be a personal word for you on your own journey of inner change and transformation. So 3 foundational thoughts. I want to suggest, first of all, that we commit ourselves to restoring relationships when we acknowledge that the quality of our relationships matters most to God. That we will commit ourselves to the restoring of our relationships when we acknowledge that the quality of our relationships matters most to God. And you will know that verse of Scripture, which comes from Corinthians, when Paul writes, and now these 3 things remain, faith, hope, and love. And then he stresses, but the greatest of these is love. I want us to go slowly here. The acid test, and I often say this, the acid test of our relationship with God, the acid test of our discipleship to Jesus Christ, the acid test of whether our faith has integrity or not, is not how much we pray. Important, critical as prayer is. It's not how much information we know from the Bible. Critical as that is, it's not how powerfully we are moving in the gifts of the Spirit. Important as that is, it's not whether we're involved daily in that important struggle for justice. Critical as that is, that the acid test of our relationship with God is the quality. It's the quality of our own relationships. You know, the great commandment, love your neighbor. And your neighbor is that person who is your neighbor, the person who's closest to you. The quality of our relationships with perhaps our partner in marriage, our children, our parents, our brothers, our sisters, our extended family, our mother-in-law, our father-in-law, It's the quality of those relationships that are so important for our life of faith. It's so easy, and you know this and I know this, it's so easy to be involved in a whole lot of, as it were, God stuff, and then we neglect so often these primary relationships within our lives. And I'll never forget it was a very big moment in my life. In my early 30s, I was pastoring my first church on my own, and that was a very big moment for me. Working very hard, preaching, teaching, visiting, forming teams, and really been really neglectful of my own relationship with Debbie. And I'll never forget, it stands out so powerfully in my memory, coming home one night and I found a letter addressed to me, "Dear Trevor." It was from Debbie, and whenever Debbie calls me dear, I know I'm in trouble. But it went very simply, "Dear Trevor," and I memorized the letter. Sometimes it worries me that I won't be worried whether you come home or not. I hope we can reconnect. Love you, Debbie. And that was like a wake-up call for me, that somehow I would need, if my relationship with God was going to have integrity, I would need to give really deep attention to the primary relationships in my own life. And that does not mean that I haven't failed since then. My greatest failures have been failures of love, and particularly within the context of my close relationships. And I'm inviting you, if I may, just to acknowledge today the priority of our relational life when it comes to our faith. That what matters most to God is the quality of these relationships. And that's why we're speaking and shining the searchlight on the restoration of these relationships today. So that's the first thought that I would like to share with you. The second one is this: we commit ourselves to restoring relationships when we honestly reflect on how we have harmed others. Now, you may like me to just give you the step on which that is based, step 8, when in the program we are invited to make a list of all persons that we have harmed and to become willing to make restitution to them all. It's a very powerful step, this. A biblical verse that really goes alongside of that step. I think of the words in John's letter, those who say, "I love God," and hate their brothers and sisters are liars. But those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God, whom they have not seen. And that comes from 1 John chapter 4, verse 20. And this is a very, very important step. For us to really begin to honestly look at our relationship life and to see where we have contributed to the harm in those relationships. This step is almost a step, is a continuation almost of step 4. Do you remember where we turned the searchlight, the divine searchlight, upon our own hearts, where we looked at our own addictive patterns of behavior, where we looked at our own destructive attachments, where we looked at our own bondage, as it were, to selfishness and self-centeredness and egocentricity. That was step 4. Now, all those things have a relational dimension as well. Those things, our destructive patterns of behavior, our attachments, our self-centeredness, our selfishness, all those things harm our relationships as well. And we need, I think, if we're going to really embark upon a journey of change, we need to see how we have harmed relationships. This is very difficult. Often we like to focus on how other people have harmed the relationship. And we can sometimes become very defensive. Often we want to justify our own behavior. The other person is in the wrong. It's not me. It's very difficult to do this step. One of my great joys as a pastor when I was actively pastoring, it was a great joy for me, was when I was able to do marriages of people who had been through the pain and trauma of divorce, first time round, as it were. And it was always for me a deep privilege as a pastor to be part of a new beginning for a couple. And often in my kind of pre-marriage counseling and preparation, I would often ask couples to reflect on their previous marriage, and I would ask them, how do you think you contributed to the breakdown of your first marriage? And I was often struck that it very seldom did, and it was wonderful when they did, but very seldom would people focus on their own contribution to the breakdown of their first marriage. Very quickly the conversation would move towards how the other person, what they had done to cause the breakdown of the marriage. It's just very hard, and I'm not sitting here in judgment upon those folk at all. I know within myself, how often I can become defensive, and how often I see myself as the offended one or the hurt one. But this step encourages us not only to see ourselves, as it were, as sinned against in relationships, but there have also been times when we have sinned against others in our relationships. So I've got a list of questions for you. You may want to make just a note of them, which might help us just to reflect quite honestly on how we have brought harm in our relationships. So let me just go through some of the questions with you, and as I say, you may like just to make a note of them. You may like to ask, when have I deceived others? Our lies bring harm to relationships. Good relationships can only exist in truth. When have I sought to control and dominate others? Sometimes we have a compulsion to control people in our lives and to dominate them, to get them to do what we want them to do always. And again, it harms relationships. When have I hurt others with my words? Words are so powerful. They either help or harm. They either build up or they break down. What are my words like in relationships? When have I withdrawn from others, into a kind of sulky silence? This is the one I've had to face up to in myself again and again and again, my tendency to withdraw. And sometimes even to withdraw very politely. But withdrawal is a way of harming another person. When have I not done what I said I would do. When haven't I followed through on my promises? When have I been insensitive, uncaring to the needs of those sometimes closest to me? Now, these are questions that may just help us to reflect a little bit more honestly upon the way we have brought harm to the quality of relationships in our own life. But let me move on quickly. My last thought is this. We commit ourselves to restoring relationships when we seek to make amends to those we harmed, except when to make amends would cause further hurt to them or others. Now, this is the restitution step. It's step 9, where in the 12-step program it goes like this. We made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. I think of the words of Jesus, very strong words of Jesus that we very seldom take seriously. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go first and be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Now, restitution is a massive subject, whether we talk about it just in terms of personal relationships or whether we talk about it in terms of very big issues, social issues, national issues. And I'm going to keep the focus primarily within the context of our personal relationships. But it's very clear that in the gospel, confession, forgiveness, and restitution all go together. Confession, forgiveness, restitution all go together. I never forget once Desmond Tutu saying, if someone stole his pen and then came to him and said to him, I'm so sorry I stole your pen, but doesn't give the pen back, there's something radically missing. Apology is not enough. There has to be some attempt to make amends, to put things right. And that's not easy. I remember going back to that note that Debbie wrote me. I knew I needed to make amends. And I remember saying to her, I can still remember this, that every Monday night, I would make sure there was nothing in my calendar, and I would go out with her. And depending on the budget, it would either just be for a milkshake or for a nice pizza. And even when we had children, every Monday night was reserved very strictly for her. So making amends can be fun, but it can also be very challenging. I've been walking with a person who committed fraud in the company in which he worked because of his own addiction to gambling. And he's come clean with the company. He hasn't been fired. And he's committed himself to a repayment of a vast amount of money with interest to that company. And making amends for him has been a very, very difficult and challenging journey. Now, I need to say that not every making amends story has a happy ending. I think I need to say that. Sometimes our apologies are rejected. Sometimes our attempt to make amends, the person says, I'm not interested at all. And we need to acknowledge that. And we also need to be very careful, and I want to speak very briefly about this, that we make amends in such a way that it does not cause further harm. So let me illustrate that. Let's say here is a person who had an affair 25 years ago. And now they are wanting to be serious with God. They're wanting to take this step seriously. It may not be the wisest thing to go to the person with whom you had an affair, and to go, maybe that person could be very happily married now, and you suddenly rock up on their doorstep to make amends, and it blows their life apart. And you've caused further injury by making amends. So there's a complexity to making amends that we have to be very, very careful about. And I find it very helpful that when I'm in a process of making amends, to talk about this with someone who can be a wise companion. Now, this has been quite a full input, and I've said maybe too much. But I just want us to push the pause button again and maybe go back into groups. And perhaps I can ask you, just what has struck you most in the input today? What has landed in your heart and mind with some kind of invitation and challenge? And maybe, and this you can share as much or as little as you want, share one area of your own relational life where you believe you have recently grown. Just one area of your own relationship life where you feel you've been growing a bit and there's been a bit of change. And it may be good to celebrate that and share that with one another. So I hope your time in the group is a good time. God bless. Well, I hope that the conversation within your group was helpful and connecting with each other. Time for me to offer an invitation to some God work. I think this is always where as it were, the rubber hits the road. Maybe just to take some time this week to reflect on the quality of your own personal relationships. To reflect on your relationships at home, extended family, with friends, with colleagues at work, etc. And then to ask God. Remember the importance of asking. Asking is the rule of the kingdom. To ask God, Lord, to what relationship in my life do you want me to give some attention? And then just to perhaps notice how through the week, how the Lord may draw your attention in a particular direction and to a certain person. And you may then want to consider how you respond to that as wisely, as thoughtfully, and as lovingly as possible. So God bless you, and look forward to our last session next week.